Hey everybody, welcome into TCO Performance Center. Matthew Coller and Dane Mizutani of the Pioneer Press, and we have had a busy little day here, folks. We talked with Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer, Adam Thielen, adofo-mensah, and Kevin O'Connell. And guess what? You'll be shocked. We got a lot of takeaways from all of those. So here's where I want to start. We're just going to go one by one for our day. So we come here, we park, we come in the building, we go through, we go into the little practice facility, and there is a giant, mammoth human being by the name of Carson Wentz. Got to say, in person, Carson, wow. Looks like he should actually be playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He is an enormous person, but that's not the point. What was interesting to hear from Carson Wentz today was just about his approach, Dane. I thought it was something that I was really wondering about is Carson Wentz. Like, you're here, you used to be a starting quarterback, you're okay with being a backup now. Are you kind of bitter? Or do you think that you should be QB1, or what's the story here? And Carson came across as someone who really understands where he is in his career as a journeyman backup quarterback. And he talked a lot about having a willingness to help in any way possible. And it really stood out to me when he told a little story about getting here and talking with JJ McCarthy and saying, this guy's never even prepared for a game before. So they were having a conversation about how Carson Wentz prepared for his many, almost 100 starts in the NFL. And I walked away from that press conference thinking, Dane, that they've got somebody who can be legitimately helpful to JJ McCarthy. Not just someone who can help if they lose JJ McCarthy and can come in and play, but that can actually take on that mentor role. I really took that away from him, that he felt like he was taking that on, and that was important to him as he arrives here with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, and I think JJ McCarthy is the centerpiece in all of this. How can the Minnesota Vikings help JJ McCarthy along, make sure JJ McCarthy is in the best position to succeed moving forward? And frankly, independent of what Sam Howell did on the field during training camp, Sam Howell probably wasn't that guy. Sam Howell is 24 years old. Sam Howell started 1 year in the NFL and it didn't go well. Carson Wentz is 32 years old, going on a decade in the NFL, a ton of experience, a ton of life experience, a ton of professional experience, all of that, where JJ McCarthy can go to Carson Wentz, ask questions, and get meaningful answers. I think that is an important part of the equation for a backup quarterback. Can Carson Wentz win 2 games if JJ McCarthy is out for 4 games? Yeah, he probably can do that too. He's proven across his 94 starts in the NFL that he is capable. Now, I did walk in here thinking, how is he going to take to this role? He was the franchise guy with the Eagles. He was a starter with the Colts. He was a starter with the Commanders. But it does seem like the past few years, 3, 4, 5, he's really started to grasp his reality, where he is at in his career. And he has transitioned to being a backup and being okay with being a backup. So I think the Vikings have someone now who can help JJ McCarthy along, who can win a game in a pinch, but can bring kind of that holistic approach to the position. That is really important. Like, now I hope we're not talking about Carson Wentz too much this year, because then something terrible happened. But overall, I think when you look at what the quarterback room looked like a week and a half ago to what it looks like right now, the Vikings are better in the aggregate.
I think they're a lot better off in not just the chances that they need to use their backup quarterback, because after the way Sam Howell practiced throughout the summer, I felt like they would lose every single game if he had to play, because for whatever reason, maybe he connected with the Washington offense a little better at times than he did with this offense, but he never really seemed to have it click for him. And Wentz has been in a bunch of different offenses, but one of them was the 2023 Los Angeles Rams, which we know that Sean McVay's offense is extremely influential and similar to what Kevin O'Connell runs. So I'm sure some of the terminology won't be that hard. He also has familiarity with Josh McCown, who was his backup quarterback in 2019. And he said, it is kind of funny, like having them work together as players, and then now he's still playing and McCown is his coach. But that communication seems to be open right away. And I just felt like Wentz was very good at expressing himself and talking about his journey and about how he's been through just about everything the NFL has to offer. He was in J.J. McCarthy's position once upon a time with a team that expected to win, and they said, Carson, you're our quarterback. And by his second year, he's leading a team toward the Super Bowl, but then gets hurt, comes back. The team's not quite the same, kind of battles through some 500 seasons, has the team move him ultimately, and goes to another team where he's the guy, and it doesn't quite work out in the last week of the season. I mean, this guy has fought through every single battle that you can fight through as a quarterback. He's seen every single defense. I think that experience is so valuable. And even just when J.J. McCarthy in the middle of a game goes through something difficult and comes over to the sideline, there's a guy on the sideline with him who can see the game extremely well, who can be looking at the iPad, who knows defenses that he's faced, and can also have the experience of what he's gone through over his almost 100 games in the NFL. I did wonder what is Carson Wentz's approach, because we've heard sometimes quarterbacks who are backups, not necessarily that Kevin O'Connell has wanted to pick or Sean Mannion before, like all those guys have been the helpful backup quarterback, Nick Mullins, of course. But even sometimes around the league, you'll hear like, hey, I'm just competing with the rest of the guys or something like that. And I think if I had picked up on that from Wentz, I would have been a little concerned about how that fit was going to go, but walked out pretty confident in Carson Wentz's fit. Now, after we were done chatting with him, we wandered over and spoke with Max Brosmer, who makes the Minnesota Vikings team. And he just said that in typical Max Brosmer type fashion, he said that as soon as he found out he was making the 53, he got on a phone call with his parents and his girlfriend and his dogs, and they had a great discussion. And then he said, all right, guys, I got to go back to, doing everything I possibly can. And what stands out about Max to me is the mature approach. He does not come across like a guy who just left college not too long ago. And Kevin O'Connell said that he had picked up on their offense and the things they wanted to do, the techniques that they use, as fast as anybody that he's been around. And that was really our experience watching Max Brosmer here. Is I think what's above the shoulders is so impressive with Max, whether it's his mentality from a day-to-day basis. He talked about when they're running the practice reps, he stands back behind and runs the mental rep on air. He does the drop back. Like this is who Max Brosmer is. And I just feel like him and Kevin O'Connell and J.J. McCarthy are birds of a feather. And that long term, this is going to be a very good fit for Max here in Minnesota. And then he also gets to see how Carson Wentz, as a veteran backup, handles himself. I really like where Max Brosmer sits with this franchise right now.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't be a better fit for Kevin O'Connell in the way they think the game. I think that was pretty clear just listening to Max Brosmer talk back in the spring when he was here in rookie minicamp. It was like this guy has a different element to him in the way he's able to think about and talk about the game. I thought what he said today was interesting, and someone asked him, like, was there a moment that you knew like you belonged? And he said it was kind of gradual. And I think that's a perfect way to describe it. Was there a moment I knew Max Brosmer was going to make the 53? And there were a couple super good throws in the Titans game, and he looked great in the Patriots game, and but there wasn't really a moment that I can point back to in training camp and say, like, yeah, that guy has it. It was gradual, and I think it was gradual because over the course of time, you get to see how someone acclimates to the offense, how they get the play call in the huddle, take it to the line of scrimmage, and how it all runs. You can't notice that right away. You have to see repetition of that happening time and time and time again. And he's doing it without getting a ton of reps. I think his mental capacity is his superpower. And he mentioned even today, it's had to be his superpower because he hasn't been the most talented quarterback over the course of his lifetime playing football. There have been better prospects. He was a guy who had to go to FCS New Hampshire because nobody wanted him when he was a kid in Roswell, Georgia. He was a kid who, after dominating at the FCS level, only the Gophers and Wake Forest show interest in him. So he goes to Minnesota. Then he was a kid who, after being one of the best quarterbacks the Gophers have had in the past decade, nobody wants him in the NFL draft. So he goes and signs as an undrafted free agent with the Vikings. But he was a guy all along who I think thought the game different and understood that the way he was going to exceed and be a guy who stood out against his peers was just being able to think the game different. He might not have the biggest arm. He might not be the most accurate. He can do all of those things at a high capable NFL level, but it was always his brain that made him stood out, and that's always on display, whether he's on the field or even just talking to him. He carries himself like a franchise quarterback. He is a third-string quarterback right now. Eventually, I think he will be a backup quarterback to J.J. McCarthy, and I would not be shocked if he is a starting quarterback at some point in his NFL career.
Guys, if you watch the show all the time, you know that I'm a hat guy, but if you're wearing hats to cover up for your hair loss, then I've got something that can help you. It's called Hims. If you've lost your hair, that doesn't mean you can't find it again. Try Hims Hair Loss Solutions, and you'll be joining hundreds of thousands of subscribers who have found their hair again. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Choose from personalized chewable, oral, spray, or serum treatments to find what works best for you. The process is simple and 100% online, so there are no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/purple insider. That's HIMS.com/purple insider for your personalized hair loss treatment options. him.com/purple insider. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and important safety information.
I think so too. I think when you see the field as well as he does, and I think that comes from just preparation, that it was surprising to me some of the throws he was able to make as an undrafted quarterback, even from minicamp. And then when we saw him play in the games, there was a quick decision making. The ball came out quickly, and I think that's all just because he knows what he's looking at. And that is something that once you see it, you know it. You sort of like, oh, okay, I don't know exactly what this is going to be, but it's something. And that's with Max Brosmer. And then the more you hear him talk, the more you really get it. Like, this guy carries himself like a pro quarterback. So a big day for him being on the 53. So after we spoke with Max Brosmer, then we go over to the other side of the practice facility and look who it is. Number 19, Adam Thielen. It feels like it was only yesterday that we were all covering Adam Thielen, because it was actually a lot of our careers spent covering Adam Thielen. So just, nice to see him back and have a discussion with him. But the takeaway from him was that he really didn't know if this was going down or not. He said he was in a hot tub preparing for practice when he got the phone call that this was going on. He said, okay, I wasn't oblivious. I knew it was realistic. He said he's on social media, so he saw all your tweets and everything else wanting him back. But, I think with Thielen, what we heard more from Kevin O'Connell was that his role, it's going to be big and it's going to be important. And even when Jordan Addison comes back, that there's going to be a lot there for Adam Thielen. So I think that they view this as a really important addition for this team. But what did you take away from what Thielen had to say?
Yeah, I mean, everyone can point to the homecoming. Did you know he's from Detroit Lakes, Minnesota? Did you know he went undrafted out of Minnesota State Mankato? Like, obviously, we know all of that. We know that he made the team after coming here on a rookie tryout and turned himself into a face of a franchise kind of guy. So it's cool to see it come full circle. It's cool to see that video on social media of Adam Thielen celebrating with his family. It's cool to hear Adam Thielen talk about how excited he is to be back in Minnesota. We know all that. But this wasn't a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl this year did not just make this move because it was a fun headline in August. They would not have made this move if they did not think Adam Thielen could contribute at a high level. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, talking to Adam Thielen, he still thinks he can contribute at a high level. And listening to Kevin O'Connell talk about the versatility that Adam Thielen has shown, not only throughout his career, but in the past 2 years in Carolina, being asked to do a lot in that offense, being asked to bring a young quarterback like Bryce Young along and help him and be a guy he can rely on. It does mirror what the Vikings are going to ask Adam Thielen to do for J.J. McCarthy, especially in the early stages of the season when Jordan Addison is serving his suspension and Jalen Naylor is still working through his hand injury. So the takeaway is that it's a fun story. It's a cool, full circle moment. but it's so much bigger than that. Like, they would not have done this just to have some good press and good PR, and, right before week one. He's also a guy that's been here before, worked a year with Kevin O'Connell, probably across the league and the people that were available. If anybody can pick up an offense in a week and a half, 2 weeks, it's Adam Thielen. Like, everybody else who was out there, whether it's on the free agent market or on the trade market, nobody's picking up this offense as quickly as Adam Thielen can, because he's been there, he's done that. So it's a cool moment for sure. But I think when we see him producing on the field, maybe week one at Soldier Field, we'll say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They did this because he can still play.
So he also talked about his connection with J.J. McCarthy, where they have worked out in the last 2 summers together. And there's even a video of Thielen talking with Alec Osmus from KSTP after one of those workouts and saying, this kid's got it, Vikings fans, you're in great hands, or whatever it was that he said. And he said, at those moments, I never would have imagined that I would have been walking back into this building to play with J.J. McCarthy. But he actually gave some great specifics about what he learned about J.J. McCarthy, that when they were going over different things, running routes, thrown on air, that he said that McCarthy had really strong specifics about what he was looking for and why certain routes worked a certain way, that their brains were kind of on the same wavelength with that communication. I think another one of J.J. McCarthy's superpowers, by the way, is being able to communicate with his wide receivers. We saw it all through camp, where after reps, he's walking over to whoever it was, Lucky Jackson or Thayer Thomas or Jordan Addison. And I think that we saw him and Addison really get on the same page. And there was a mention of Kevin O'Connell that he thought Addison had the strongest, or one of the strongest camps of anybody on the entire team, which I would completely agree with. And I think when you can communicate well and Adam Thielen can communicate well, that is a bonus for those two getting on the same page, that they've already been having those high-level football-y type discussions about the offense, and that's not going to be something new for him or them when Adam Thielen actually arrives and gets out on the practice field. It's not going to be, oh, nice to meet you, let's talk about a route. They've already actually had a simulation of this, and when there's only how many days left until the Vikings play, every minute kind of counts with that they have had banked up. But I think the other part with Adam Thielen is just, he could not control how excited he was to be back with the team. I mean, the entire press conference, he was trying to say things that are very Adam Thielen-y, like, be where my feet are. And he was, talked about how much Carolina meant to him and how that was hard to leave Carolina, and that was a unique experience for him because he had always lived in Minnesota around his family and his lifelong friends and all that stuff. But you couldn't take the smile off his face when he was talking about being back in Minnesota. So there was some folks who had questioned, like, does Thielen want to come back? Did they leave on bad terms or something? Well, clearly not. And Kevin O'Connell talked a lot about, that was my first question to O'Connell, about their relationship, about them staying in touch for this entire time, just as people in the league. And I think that that's important too, that he knows O'Connell. He knows how O'Connell competes. He knows how he is as a play caller. He knows his confidence as a coach and how he communicates. So all of those things in a tight pinch, not that I don't think Kendrick Bourne could have come here and play as a veteran player, but it's got all these little kind of ancillary benefits to it beyond just, oh, they got a receiver who's 35 who caught some passes last year.
Yeah, there was a moment, like you talk about Adam Thielen not being able to contain his excitement. I think our friend Kevin Seifert asked, hey, were you given a choice at any point in this? Like, were you given a choice if you wanted to come here? And he said, I'm not going to get into the negotiations. I'm not going to get into, what I did or didn't have a choice in the matter, and tried to keep it cards close to the vest. And then a question later, our friend Alec Lewis asked, how excited are you to work with Kevin O'Connell? And Adam Thielen said, well, I'm super excited. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't excited. So basically, yes, he had a choice to come here or not, and he did want to come here, is what you can take away from that. He's super excited. I think it makes sense that everyone involved is excited about this move. We'll see how it works out. It did take me back to 2010 when I saw this news break yesterday, because when I was a wee little boy, 5, 6, 7 years old, I liked Randy Moss, was obsessed with him, had an 84 jersey. Well, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I came here for college. They traded for Randy Moss in 2010. I called my mom. I said, send me my 84 jersey. And I got it, wore it around school or around campus for about 4 weeks. And then we all know how that ended. But I was thinking to myself, are there kids in college today thinking, wow, I grew up watching this guy and here he is. I think those full circle moments across the state are going to be fun. But I cannot stress enough, they did this because they think he can still play.
Right. I don't think they did this for the vibes. They definitely did it because he can fit into any role in this offense. We've seen him play the slot. He played the slot a lot in Carolina, but we saw him do it here, outside, bunch formation, whatever you need to throw at him, he should be able to handle it. And they are going to need it to work out way better than Randy Moss's return to Minnesota in order for this thing to work over the first 3 weeks. And then, there was the question to Kevin O'Connell about how he fits in after. And O'Connell basically said, we have so many formations, so many combinations that, there's going to be a role there. There is no real 1, 2, 3, even though we know who number 1 is. I guess we should say 2, 3, 4 after that. But for me, his role after, I think, should probably remain as wide receiver 3 as much as they can, because I think as Jalen Nailor does provide a certain element, it's only ever been that, and his training camp did not give me a ton more confidence that there's any other ceiling. I think he can play in the league, and I think he's a good deep threat from time to time. But Thielen is a complete wide receiver still, and he averaged, nearly 13 yards a catch last season, which I think we wouldn't have expected after the underneath passes of 2023 from Bryce Young. Also, he was very defensive about Bryce Young, even though that wasn't my question. Sorry, Adam, you'll have to review the tape on that one. I was just asking about working with a young quarterback, and I mentioned Bryce, but he said that he was thrilled the way that Bryce handled everything in Carolina and fought his way through some really difficult situations. So you could kind of even get that little bit of I'm going to defend my quarterback that we know Adam Thielen for. We talked to Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and Kevin O'Connell announced the captains. I will tell you them now. J.J. McCarthy. Wow, that is a shocker, the starting quarterback. If he hadn't been, then that would be the lead of the podcast. But Harrison Smith, Brian O'Neill, Josh Metellus, let's see, Jonathan Grenard, Aaron Jones, and Justin Jefferson.
Andrew DePaula was the last
Andrew
one.
DePaula. Gosh,
I think there's 8 of them.
I wrote down AD, and I was like, remember who AD is. Yes, Andrew DePaula. Shout out to the long snapper and a tremendous leader on their special teams group. The one that I would circle here, so Metellus was a captain last year. We know that Brian O'Neill's been the leader for a while. But the guy that, to me, was a different person this offseason than last year was Jonathan Grenard. And I think it shows right here that Grenard kind of decided after last year, I am the captain now. This is my franchise, and I'm going to take us somewhere. We felt that from him every time we spoke to him, and it's clear that his teammates did as well.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Grenard, of anybody at training camp, I agree that Jordan Addison might have had the most impressive training camp on the field with the connection he was able to develop with J.J. McCarthy, with Justin Jefferson on the sideline for most of it. But looking at the big picture and all the pieces, Jonathan Grenard had the most impressive training camp of anybody on the Vikings. He was dominant. He lived in the backfield. A big reason Sam Howell struggled to pick up the offense is because he always had to have Jonathan Grenard in his face, because Jonathan Grenard pretty much beats any left tackle he lines up against that isn't named Christian Darrisaw, and Christian Darrisaw is working his way back through training camp. So Jonathan Grenard was dominant on the field, but yes, he was laser focused off of it. Anytime we talked to him, it was clear. Last year wasn't good enough for him. 14-3 was great. He had a breakout year by his standards and quarterback pressures, and deserved to be an all-pro if you ask me. None of that matters to him because they lost in the first round of the playoffs, and you can see the gears in his mind turning every time you ask about what are your expectations for this year. He's the guy who is pushing this thing forward. He is the guy on defense who is an extension of Brian Flores, an extension of Kevin O'Connell, an extension of the front office. He's the guy leading it right now, and I think him being voted team captain totally makes sense. I remember one of the press conferences we had with Jonathan Grenard in training camp where you got to kind of see the laser focused. Is he was dead serious. He said, yeah, honestly, like I don't care who's in the secondary because the front seven we're gonna sack the quarterback every time, or we don't have to worry about who's in the secondary. And it sounds preposterous because yes, you do have to worry about who's in the secondary, but that just shows kind of an insight into his mind. They're taking care of business up front. He is the one leading the charge in that.
He's just been intense. I mean, really from day one, he's been intense, whether it's with his teammates out on the field, with us every time we talk to him. I'm always like, are you going to sack one of us? Because we can't, that we would be dead. So, no, but I think that him, after a superstar type season, sometimes guys go one way or the other. Yep. You know, sometimes guys will be kind of entitled and I'm a big superstar and rework my contract or whatever else, which honestly he's probably underpaid now after what he did last year. And Grenard has gone the other way with it, of like really feeling like I'm going to be the reason that, and I'm going to drive everybody else to where this defense can go. And that is just reflective of him in the captaincy. On Harrison Smith, there was a question to Kevin O'Connell about Harrison Smith and his health. And O'Connell said, well, there is a injury report that will be coming out next week. Fair enough. Those are the rules. But we were both told that Harrison Smith has been dealing with a personal health issue that is going to have him be week to week. And that's really all the information that we have. So we're just going to have to wait and see on Harrison Smith and his recovery. But it does sound like week one may be in question for Harrison Smith. They're deep at that position of the safety spot. Theo Jackson had a good camp. We know how good Josh Metellus is, but it could force them to shuffle a little bit in the secondary if Harrison Smith is not good to go week one. After he was out for such a long time with an illness, we were wondering, and I'm sure everybody else was too, what's happening here? Is everything okay? And our understanding is everything is okay, but there's a recovery process and it's going to be week to week. So that's the information that we have right now on Harrison Smith. Another Harrison, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked about, Harrison Phillips. And I'll tell you what I wrote down in my notes, because it was a long answer. There were a lot of words and a lot of respect shown for Harrison Phillips. But what I wrote down in my notes is, sounds like Phillips wasn't going to play much. That's what it sounded like to me, because when Kevin O'Connell said, well, you know, once we talk to him, his opportunity is probably going to be better with the Jets. I think that Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen were so darn good, and I think Jalen Redmond was so darn good, that Harrison Phillips was set to basically be a rotational type of player that was going to work in and out and maybe play 400 snaps. And in New York, he's going to play 800 snaps. That sounded like like if we have a guy that we're not going to really use as much because he got beat out by somebody else, and Redmond, we agree, was fantastic in training camp. They've been high on Redmond. And Levi Drake Rodriguez, I should throw him out there as well. That those guys were just more impressive to them, and they felt like they had an asset that they could move. So even as experienced and as much of a captain and a locker room guy and a community guy and all those things as Harrison Phillips was, this is the nature of the sport, is that sometimes somebody else comes into training camp and proves themselves, and then you get moved somewhere else. That was how I felt listening to the answer. Was that your takeaway as well, Dane?
Yeah, especially listening to how Kwesi approached his answer. I think everybody was surprised last week when Harrison Phillips got traded. I thought he was just a guy who would maybe retire with the Vikings. He means a lot to the community. He was a pretty proven player on the field. I think he had a pretty good year last year. So I was surprised on the surface when that trade goes down. But then you listen to them talk today. You talked about Kevin O'Connell, the conversation he had with Harrison Phillips shortly after he was traded. I thought it was interesting listening to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talk about it, though. He mentioned something along the lines of it's good for the organization and it's good for the player. So I think that good for the player taps into, yeah, he was probably going to see his role reduced to more of a rotational player on the defensive line, not a foundational player that he was signed to be back in 2022 or whenever he first signed with the team. But then in that same breath, like you hear Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talk, good for the player and good for the team. Well, you can't really pay a rotational defensive lineman what they were paying Harrison Phillips this year. So it did seem to kind of play itself out. And when you really dig in and pay attention to what happened in training camp and think back to other players on the defensive line, how deep that room was, the surprising trade from last week does start to make a little bit more sense. I think it's a guy who means a lot to the franchise, will always mean a lot to certain people in this community and certain people within these four walls, this building. But there are other players that are just better than him right now on the roster. I think Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave are at the top of that list. But yes, Jalen Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Elijah Williams, like all of these guys are pushing for playing time. I think it's going to be more of a rotational front after Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. And I don't think Harrison Phillips had put himself into, we have a trio that starts up front. I think it was, we have a duo that starts up front, and we have a bunch of guys who rotate in. This was good for the team because the Vikings don't have to pay a rotational pass rusher in the trenches. It was good for the player because Harrison Phillips can go play damn near every down in New York.
And when it comes to a guy like Harrison Phillips in his role, it's something that there are more defensive tackles can do than what Javon Hargrave can do. Mm-hmm. There are more guys who can stuff the middle, own gaps, get into the backfield, which I think Jalen Redmond is excellent at, as versus the run, than there are guys who are Jonathan Allen and can put up 50 pressures in a season. And that's just never been Phillips. And it seems like this is a philosophical change as well from Brian Flores of making the focus, being able to rush with four. And maybe in part because the cornerback room remains a little bit suspect. That was something that was asked about as well. When Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was asked about the cornerbacks, he said, well, we did pick up Fabian Morrow, so yesterday I made the headline of the show, the Vikings pick up a veteran corner, and people were not happy that it was Fabian Morrow. Sorry, it's a fact. He has been a starter in the league. He called Fabian an NFL caliber player. I would agree with that. I mean, he's been around for a long time in the league, but that wasn't the big acquisition, the big trade for a corner, the big signing that I think a lot of fans were looking for after training camp, where Mekhi Blackmon came so short of expectations. And that was something that we didn't see coming entering training camp. And if the only answer for that is Fabian Morrow, it does leave you feeling a little bit on rocky ground about the cornerback group outside of the starters. But that also goes for a lot of positions where, yeah, if you get to the fourth guy on the depth chart, then you are going to have some concerns. At least they've been able to develop Dwight McGlothern for a couple years. At least Morrow has played in the league. They did keep Zemiah Vaughn, but it's still a unit that doesn't give you complete confidence in what they have at the cornerback spot. Did that sound to you like anything else is on the way, Dane? Because it kind of sounded to me like, yeah, we might be set there. That's what it sounded like to me. I could be, by the time we run this, there could be 3 new corners.
Yeah, I got a little bit different of a feeling in that moment, because when he's asked about, hey, you have 4 cornerbacks on the roster right now, and he mentions Fabian Morrow. No disrespect to Fabian Morrow, but that was like his first thing that he pointed to. And then he said, we play big nickel. So safeties, we look at our secondary as kind of like a holistic thing and not just cornerbacks. It felt like, do you know the meme where it's like the guy who is angry behind a mask but is wearing a happy face? It felt like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was like, we're good, I promise. And then behind the happy face mask, he's like, maybe. I don't know if it's imminent. I don't think they're on the phone with Stephon Gilmore's agent right now. Maybe they are. Maybe when this releases, they'll have signed him. But I do think when you read between the lines of who he mentioned as we're going to be fine, and then you hear him say we're always looking to add and improve, I think he's probably looking to add and improve at some point. But whoever they bring in, I don't think they're signing him to be the number 2 corner. I think, yeah, Isaiah Rodgers is the number 2 corner. I don't think they're even signing, if they bring Stephon Gilmore in, I don't know if they're signing him to be the number 3 corner. I think Jeff Okudah has earned the right to try to be the number 3 corner on this team going from training camp into the regular season. So whoever they bring in, probably just depth. I probably would be in favor of them signing a veteran for depth, because if my depth is Dwight McGlothern at cornerback 4, and then Fabian Morrow and Zemiah Vaughn practice squad players at cornerbacks 5 and 6, like, I don't feel amazing about that. So no, I don't know if I walked away thinking they're going to get someone. They're working the phones right now for it. But I think they are looking to improve that room.
I mean, I think opportunities, if they arise, but I don't know if there's all that draft capital from the day 3 stuff, if they're out there shopping. Maybe they are. I mean, I think that they should be looking for one more guy, but I think what we probably underestimate with our skepticism of Jeff Okudah is how they feel about him and his fit in this defense, which seemed to be, they were very high on how Jeff Okudah came in and handled himself during this training camp. And it's risky. And I would agree that if anybody says that they don't buy that, I get it. Like the history is not great there, but they're also going to go on their coaches' evaluations as well. And if those evaluations are high, then they might not make that move. I also think it's just hard to find, like when we talk about receivers, there's always veteran receivers kind of bumping about, like Hunter Renfrow. If the Vikings hadn't gotten Thielen, it would have been Kendrick Bourne. It would have been Hunter Renfrow. There's always like guys. Corners, I think, is a little bit harder, although Shaq Griffin did get released. And I would be very much in favor of Shaq Griffin coming back as part of the depth unit if they wanted him back here. So maybe. It's just at this time of year, it's hard to find too many guys that are going to make you feel wildly confident in the cornerback group. So I guess we'll see on that one. And the last hardcore football-y note here before I have a final question for you, Dane, is special teams. Sounded to me like Miles Price on week 1, at least the way it sounded, is he is going to be back there standing, waiting for that punt to fly through the air and be the returner, which you talk about making you nervous when that punt's in the air and you and I are looking up into the Soldier Field sky, watching it come down into Miles Price's hands. There's going to be a lot of, oh boy, is he going to catch it? Is he going to make the play? But I do agree with Kevin O'Connell that there's something there. The kid has a ton of confidence and he's got explosiveness. He's got a natural playmaking mindset. I think they focused on that. At least, again, at this moment. I might have to clip half the podcast if they make a bunch of changes later after we record this. But as of this moment, seems like Miles Price is the dude.
Yeah, I didn't get a sense that he was just saying something to be nice to the guy that they allowed a spot on the 53. And allowed's not even the right word because Miles Price took that spot on the 53. There was every day in training camp, guys who would catch punts before and after practice, and there was like 8 of them. They were trying to find somebody to do it, and Miles Price was the guy that consistently stood out, and then he translated that into games where he was dynamic at the position. I think he brings a different element. I think he's earned the right to be the guy, and I get the sense that with the organization and the culture that they've tried to establish here of like, if you earn the right, you get to be the guy, that they're okay right now with giving Miles Price an opportunity to prove that he can be a guy in the league. We had this discussion countless times in training camp, though. Do I trust an undrafted rookie to catch a punt in Soldier Field, primetime Monday Night Football? No, but at a certain point, you need to just give a guy an opportunity to show you that he can be that guy. You remember when you were applying for jobs out of college and it'd be like, you need 5 years of experience, and you're a kid like applying for an entry-level job saying like, I don't have 5 years of experience. Like I need you to give me an opportunity so I can get that 5 years of experience. Miles Price is that right now. He has proven that he can do it. He just needs somebody to give him the opportunity to do it. So I think the Vikings are going to do that for him. I think he's earned the right to do that for them. Maybe in 6 hours they'll sign Mecole Hardman. I don't know. So I think right now, though, Miles Price has shown enough. Yeah, let him try. Let him earn the opportunity to show you that he can be trusted back there. If he has one job on this team and it is to catch the punt, then Miles Price, you better be out there on the practice field morning, noon, and night practicing just catching the damn punt, because that's all you have to do. He's on the roster to catch the punt. Marcus Sherrill's made a career of being out there and just catching the punt. So if you can make something happen after that, good. But just don't drop that thing on Monday night in Soldier Field.
One more thing for you folks to be kept up at night by the Minnesota Vikings. All right, last question. Dane, earlier in this summer, you stopped by my abode And we sat there basically on the porch and went through every single game and had you pick every single game. And if I'm not mistaken, you ended up with 12 wins for the Minnesota Vikings. You were very, very high on this team at that point. That was before we had seen a single training camp practice. Now what we've seen, all of training camp, we have seen the completion more or less, unless they trade for Rod Woodson, Deion Sanders, Darrell Green. Pretty much this is your Minnesota Vikings, right? Maybe Dante Hall could still be out there, return a punt or two. Percy Harvin wants to make a comeback. Devin Hester, unlikely. So I think more likely than not, this is your Minnesota Vikings 95%, 99% finished. Will you stay with that? Will you stick with a 12-win prediction for the year 2025?
I'm not backing down. I'm not a coward. I'm not gonna go to your house and pick 12 wins and get caught up in the moment. And I'll admit it. When I got to 12, I was like, wow, if they get to 12, it's really impressive. But look, I think they're a playoff team. I do. And I think there are a ton of outcomes out there for this particular football team. And starting a rookie quarterback who he's a second-year quarterback, he's effectively a rookie. I get all that. I get that can lead to a bunch of different outcomes. But I believe in J.J. McCarthy. I believe in the infrastructure in place for him. And I think above all that, I think the team is even more talented than I thought when I was on your porch in the summer. I looked at their roster on paper at that time and said, I don't see a lot of weaknesses. But then I see guys like Jonathan Grenard barreling and off the edge and looking the part in training camp. And I can project out that guy's going to be better than he was last year. I see Dallas Turner, who put on muscle and then also was able to translate that into explosiveness on the field. I didn't see a lot of Justin Jefferson, but I didn't need to. I know what I'm going to get out of Justin Jefferson. I see Jordan Addison going out there, balling out with his opportunity. TJ Hawkinson looking the part of a tight end one with a full off season to prepare. Christian Darrisaw getting back to his full health. The interior of the offensive line with Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, working in concert with Donovan Jackson and Brian O'Neill. I'm listing the whole roster because I think that I've seen how talented they can be if J.J. McCarthy is just good. If he's just honestly above average, I think they can get to 10. If he's good, I think they can get to 12. So no, I'm not going to back down from 12 wins because I might have got a little overzealous on the porch pod. I think they can win double-digit games, get to the playoffs. If they are at 12, I will be doing victory laps every time I'm on the pod because that would be pretty impressive. But I think the biggest takeaway is this is a very talented football team that can do something special this year so long as the quarterback is who we think he is.
It's a shade aggressive, but I think at this point in the season, this is the fewest number of major questions that I've had about the Minnesota Vikings since 2017. Just when we go position by position, what's this guy going to be? How's this guy going to perform? Is this going to work? There's questions, of course. There's questions on 32 teams. The Philadelphia Eagles have questions about certain guys. We were just talking about the punt returner for 5 minutes. But in terms of what you can project, if this team is healthy, what people have produced, all around J.J. McCarthy, we can project those things. We can project what J.J. McCarthy can be if everyone else is even the normal version of themselves. If Justin Jefferson and Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman and Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, even Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, if these guys are the normal version of themselves, they should win double-digit football games, and I think that's where we should set the bar. It has been a super, super fun offseason with you, Dane, a very long offseason. We have done podcasts at the owners' meetings, at the combine, on my porch, in this room after many a press conference and everything else. And the next time we do it will be inside Soldier Field following the Minnesota Vikings matchup on Monday Night Football. So I look forward to being there with you and doing that podcast the next time I see you. Thank you very much for your time. Football.